Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Sunday morning to you all. Hope you guys are doing great out there this morning and waking up and feeling fantastic and having a great weekend out there so far. Here to bring you the latest on what's going to happen weather-wise for your Sunday. There is a risk of strong to severe storms for some of the same similar areas it's been dealing with over the last couple of days. Today will be no different, maybe shifted a little bit further to the east in general, but we'll kind of zoom into these areas. Talk about how I think some of the outlooks could change in the next few updates per the Storm Prediction Center. I think we'll go up a category in this one area that I'm really watching. And I can tell you that, with what's happening right now, actually falling from the sky compared to what the models think is happening, it's way off. So we'll kind of compare some model guidance instead of just show you the HRRR model, the HRRR model. And we'll just kind of discuss what's going on, what potentially could unfold for you folks across the Midwest and Upper Midwest today. But of course, we'll talk about the rest of the U.S. too, kind of zoom into a couple individual areas of interest in the Southeast. We'll talk about out west, and we'll break down everything. After we get done doing all that, we're going to discuss a little bit on the pattern change coming up, especially for the central and really the eastern U.S. A pretty, I would say, substantial pattern change. I mean, I'm not talking about anything like we're going to get snow in July or anything like that, a massive Arctic cold front. But we are going to have a cool down, and we are going to have a pretty unsettled pattern. We're going to talk about what's driving that and what that means for areas that are dealing with those drought conditions and how we could improve them, especially as we get later into this week, into this weekend, maybe into early next week. So we'll talk about that, give you a brief update on the tropics too, talk about the severe risk days to come. So if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like, and if anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put that in the comments below. Of course, we're praying for the country, regardless of your political views. I think we all know what happened yesterday, and it's very sad, just very, very sad. So praying for everybody involved and the entire situation. Okay. Before we get going, I do want to mention this. Me and Gerald Mingle. If you don't know who he is, he's in my recommended channels, or just type in YouTube GM Weather and his channel will come up. He's a good friend of mine in the weather community, one of my better friends here in South Carolina. Great dude, just great voice. You're going to see him on the news one day. He's going to school to become a weatherman at UNC Charlotte. But me and him are going to talk and chit-chat a little bit about the weather this afternoon. We're going to do this in some of our downtime. I mean, it's kind of slow out there in the weather world in general, so we're just going to kind of talk about things, kind of geek out. We're going to do it via Skype, kind of record it, then post it. And it's probably going to drop around 6 p.m. Eastern time this evening. It's going to be on his channel, but I'll definitely post it on my social media profiles, including this one. And it's just a way for you guys to see a couple dudes just geeking out about the weather. And it's not always going to be about the weather. We're going to talk about personal things probably, and just have a good time. So if you're interested, 6 p.m. tonight, it'll drop, and could go on for 30 minutes, could go on for an hour and a half, but regardless, if you're interested in that, it's called Scud Spotter Podcast. There's a story behind that I'm sure that we will discuss in the video. So definitely check that out if y'all are interested, if y'all having a little bit of downtime this evening. So let's get talking about the weather for today. Watches, warnings, and advisories. The storyline once again is heat. The orange heat advisories. I mean, we got entire states under heat advisories for today. We got areas along the Gulf coastline, heat advisories. New Orleans, excessive heat warnings, where the air temperature will be quite hot mixed with a high humidity. Heat indices will be well into the 100s. Excessive heat watches for some of the big, higher populated areas along the I-95 corridor too, in the mid-Atlantic areas of southern New England. So the heat is definitely flexing. Heat advisories also more so in the eastern Carolinas. We got a lot of red flag warnings out here in more of that hot pink color. Excessive heat warnings in that dark purple, I would say the more purplish color rather than pink. It's getting pretty dry out here, so we are getting some monsoon energy, monsoon rain out here, but we need it to be a little bit more aggressive so we can knock out some of these very dry areas and get you guys a little bit more wet out here. So we do have ongoing severe thunderstorm watches up for just an area of storms moving through areas of the plains into the Midwest. So excessive rainfall outlook. As of now, I would say the only concern would be in northern Illinois, including Chicago. We do have that slight risk, at least a 15% chance of flash flood guidance being met. I am very surprised there's no marginal risk in Florida today, and I'm going to talk about why here in a couple minutes. I do think, areas of like the central peninsula of Florida could certainly get a few inches of rain today. Like I said, I'll zoom into Florida here in a second, but very, very surprised there's no marginal risk at least. Very odd. But the Storm Prediction Center outlook, I want to reiterate this. I expect some information to change. It did yesterday. We had an upgraded category to an enhanced risk across areas of the high plains. I don't know if we'll get an upgrade per category, but I do think we will. I'm saying I don't think we'll get a bump up from a slight to an enhanced. I do think we'll get a bump up from a marginal to a slight in areas of the Midwest, really in this area. And I'm going to talk about why in this video once we get to the timestamp that includes the north central U.S. But as of now, as of around just before 7 a.m. Eastern time, it's just a marginal risk that extends through areas of the Great Lakes region, the Midwest, into the Ohio Valley, Chicago, Milwaukee, Indianapolis, Columbus, Peoria, Cincinnati, all Detroit, Cleveland, higher populated areas, all included in this. Minneapolis, I think I already said that. Slight risk up here. The confidence for severe weather is a little bit more higher up here. And I think that if you live in the slight risk, I think this will evolve later in the period today. Like I'm talking about tonight. Like I said, we will zoom in to all of that. But the tornado risk, there's two areas. These could connect. 2% risk of a tornado in the green here. 2% risk of a tornado in higher populated areas for today. So, I mean, Milwaukee, Chicago, Detroit, almost to Cleveland, almost all the way down to Indianapolis, but it's still well north. But wind threats, well, I think we'll get an upgraded category here, I'm telling you. But wind threat here, 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour within 25 miles in a given location. But of course, you got the black outline region, which includes Bismarck down to Aberdeen, down to Sioux Falls, almost Pierre, but 10% risk of winds exceeding that 75 miles per hour or higher. Hail threat, got a hatch risk of that too, but in the yellow, 15% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. Black outline area, 10% risk of hail exceeding 2 inch in diameter or larger. So we do have a risk of significant severe weather today. So storms today in the southeast, heat, pretty much the primary story, but nothing too extreme one way or the other, I would say. The heat has just been extreme all summer, but we get to about midday, not a whole lot going on, but we get into this afternoon, we start to get these pop-up downpours across the southeast, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina. Anybody could get these. These will pop up, then implode, fall apart, and then that's all she wrote. Just typical stagnant summer flow across the southeast when you got a ridge affecting your pattern. But down here in Florida, a little bit more widespread. You see these showers and storms kind of congealing together in central Florida. A couple inches of rain could fall. Like I said, very surprised there's not at least a marginal risk in central Florida today, as models are really zooming into the idea of a very rainy day from Gainesville down to Orlando to this evening. Could drop a lot of rain fast, so be aware of that. If you do live here in kind of central to north central of Florida, a lot of rain could fall once we get deeper into this afternoon. But we start to get into tomorrow morning, it gets quieter per usual in the summer. But rainfall between now and the next 24 hours, we could get the National Weather Service saying that it likes the idea of kind of the southern sections of the deep south, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana to have the highest chance of some rain. Somebody can get a quarter inch, maybe a half an inch of rain. But all in all, this will be very pop-up in nature. I think the heat is going to be pretty brutal in this area today, especially, let's go on and show you guys Louisiana. And the actual air temperatures, not too bad. Not too bad. And let's make sure I had this right. I do this sometimes. Yeah, I did. So I'm just questioning myself here. But this is the heat. Make sure I have this right for today because I had it on Sunday. Pretty hot temperatures, no widespread 100s. The thing that is really going to be pretty bad today is the heat indices, especially down here in Louisiana along the Gulf Coast line. For example, the heat index is going to be over 110, 100, maybe up to 111, maybe as high as 115 down here in Baton Rouge, New Orleans. So along the Gulf Coast line, of course, you're saved by that breeze off the ocean. It might not be much of a breeze if we have such a ridge in place, but, stagnant airflow, well, I just have to see. It's a random banshee yell there for you guys, my kids in the background. Sound like a chimpanzee or something, but You know, you get that every once in a while when you got a house full of kids. But but even Nashville, I mean, very, very hot. The heat indices are into the low 100s. But you move forward. This is the rain I'm talking about in Florida today. And it's not like the National Weather Service isn't seeing it. They are, because they're forecasting a couple inches of rain. I'm just surprised they don't have at least a marginal risk up. But, 1 to 2 inches of rain. We got Tampa Bay, area, a half inch to an inch, maybe Orlando, maybe around an inch, just north of Orlando. But basically between Gainesville and Orlando, if you live in this area, you could get a couple inches of rain today. As kind of just boundaries kind of collide, and you just kind of might congeal in this area. So just be aware of that. The heats will be pretty nasty across the Carolinas today, even the valleys between the Alps and the Cumberland Plateau in Tennessee. I mean, Chattanooga might hit 100 a day. Knoxville, very, very hot, upper 90s. Atlanta, pretty hot. Columbia, pretty hot. Up to Charlotte, Raleigh, very, very hot conditions, upper 90s, maybe low 100s. But, your heat index is going to be pretty brutal too. But guys, it's been like this all summer. It's honestly, I don't want to say it's not worth mentioning, but you guys know it's just hot in the summer. Even a normal summer day in the southeast in the summer is hot. It's very hot. But the heat indices today across the Carolinas, areas of Georgia, well into the 100s, especially the Carolinas. So northeast today, it's going to be a pretty quiet weather day. We take it to about early afternoon. We get into this afternoon, maybe a pop-up storm down here in New Jersey, the Delmarva, some shower activity into western PA, western New York. Maybe by the time you get into this evening, maybe a little bit higher risk of some storms could get going here in southeast PA, central New Jersey. We'll watch for that. But outside of that, guys, some showers could drift in overnight across the Adirondacks into the Vermont, New Hampshire area. And then as we're getting into tonight, the wee hours of the morning, we could have some storms rumbling through southern Ontario. So if you're viewing from that area, some storms are possible just before the sun comes up for tomorrow morning. And then we could be waking up tomorrow morning to kind of a stormy start across western New York State, areas of PA, and even like around Detroit, as the leftover energy that we're going to talk about kind of surges through the Midwest and the Great Lakes region this evening into tonight. The south central U.S., a pretty quiet weather day for your Sunday. Not as much storm activity along the Texas coastline, but you can't rule out a little bit of downpour activity down here. But I don't think it'll be as high as a risk as you've seen like this past week. But we get into the overnight hours, some rain could surge out of Colorado into areas of western Kansas. Then we wake up tomorrow morning, it's pretty quiet. Sunday will be a pretty quiet weather day. Today will be a quiet weather day across the southern plains, south central U.S. Now it's a different story. You head north into the north central U.S. A broad look at what's going on. First off, and let's give the HRRR model the benefit of the doubt here. This is the latest model, right? This is saying what is happening about right now. Okay, you see a little bit of rain showing up here in Wisconsin, down here in like northern sections of Indiana. You compare that to what's actually going on. Okay, it does have rain here. It does have rain here, and it does have rain here. So it's got the right idea, but I want you guys to note here that it's, that complex of storms in Wisconsin is a lot more aggressive than what this is showing. And even the stuff heading out of South Dakota is a lot more aggressive. So it doesn't have necessarily the right idea. It's close, but I just want to kind of mention it's not verifying very well. So I guess, how much can we take from this? I guess is what I'm saying, but this is all we got. We're going to compare this with a NAM2, see who's going to do better or who's doing better this morning. But we do take it to about midday. It says all the activity this morning tapers off. And there's not a whole lot going on by the time we get into about lunchtime, 1 p.m. But it's as we are getting into this late this afternoon to this evening, it's around 7 p.m. You see some energy kind of heading out of Canada, about to dip into South Dakota. And then we see widespread shower and storm activity developing in the Midwest. Eastern Iowa, southwestern Wisconsin, northern Illinois. A little bit of activity also in lower Michigan. This all tries to evolve late into the evening. This brings a very stormy evening into Milwaukee, Chicago, and then crosses over Lake Michigan. And then all of this gets into lower Michigan overnight, brings a very unsettled overnight period across lower Michigan. And then we got this nasty area storms moving through areas of North Dakota. Now, you notice there's not a lot showing up in South Dakota. I want you guys to note that. We have a pretty big risk of severe weather into South Dakota. I mean, we got the wind threats the highest in South Dakota, the hail threats the highest in just about South Dakota into North Dakota. But if the HRRR model has anything to say about it, it's saying, I don't know why, but, I'm going to tell you guys that there's not going to be much of a severe weather threat today. But just keep in mind that these models, you don't look at them as exactly what's going to happen. They're just guidance. That's all they are. So, but if we get a closer look at all this, and I'm just going to look at the latest long-range HRRR model. Okay, like I said, midday gets quiet. Not a whole lot going on. You start to get into this afternoon. This is around 5 p.m. We start to get some big storms showing up here in eastern Iowa. And they could form as far north as southern Minnesota. Okay, these look pretty significant as we're getting into around dinner time, 7, 8 p.m. If you live in Dubuque, Janesville, even Madison, getting into Rockford, late tonight. I wouldn't say late tonight. Later this evening is what I meant. Late this afternoon. These storms could pack a punch. I mean, there could be a small tornado risk, definitely a damaging wind risk, and I think there's more of a hail risk than what they're giving this credit for. We just got to watch. This is where I think we'll get an upgrade to a slight risk here at about the 8:30, 8:45 update, which will be around 7:30, 7:45 Central Standard Time. Central Time out here in the upper Midwest. But at the same time, you got storms really close to Detroit. Remember, this model, guys, is going to be dead on, guys. Especially handling a northwest flow event like this basically is. But these storms will, affect areas of southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, head over Lake Michigan, and I mean, this is like 1 o'clock in the morning, guys. This is bringing pretty unsettled weather. But I want to tell you, these storms could extend down to Indianapolis. They could all extend. They're probably going to have a chance to extend all the way to like Dayton, Ohio. We just got to see how these storms are going to get. How are they going to do into the afternoon, evening hours? And that'll tell us what's going to happen into the overnight hours. But it looks like this is falling apart by the time it gets into lower Michigan to the wee hours in the morning tomorrow morning. But could be holding strong too. It very well could be. But what about, let's back this up. What is the NAM showing? So let's look at the NAM model. I don't show this much, but I think it's worth showing in this situation. The NAM is handling the complex of storms that's going on in Wisconsin a little bit better. Shows it a little bit more aggressive. But it is showing a bunch of heavy storm activity in central lower Michigan that it's not really there. But it agrees with the HRRR model that most of this is going to fizzle apart. Now, it does show some storms making its way down here near the Indiana-Ohio line. So, if that happens, it's saying around 3 to 4 p.m. this afternoon, Dayton, Ohio, getting close to Indianapolis, but definitely not there. But remember, don't take this super, super serious, just model guidance. And I'm showing you this because there's a difference here. HRRR model definitely does not show these storms down here this afternoon like the NAM is. But, it surges these storms all the way down. It actually wraps it back into Indianapolis. Shows another area of storms that develops the southern tip of Lake Michigan. And really doesn't develop the storms hardly at all like the HRRR model does. Remember, the HRRR model late this afternoon to this evening develops storms here in eastern Iowa. The NAM does not. It basically has some storm activity in southern Wisconsin, develops this weird structure of storms here in northern Indiana, around Chicago also, into Illinois, and then kind of drapes it south and eventually southwest as it kind of rides around kind of an embedded upper high pressure here. And yeah, it just kind of wraps back into Illinois. Then tomorrow morning, you're waking up to an area of storms in southern Minnesota, northern Iowa. So you notice there's a huge difference there. I mean, it's massive, guys. It's a pretty big difference. But if you do look at the HRRR model and you buy this run, it indicates that damaging wind risk with these storms. As we're going throughout the overnight hours, you can see that right into here, it picks up on pocket. I'm sorry, this is the updraft Ulysses swath. I'm everywhere this morning. I was about to say, I was like, what am I talking about? I'm rambling here. This is the updraft Ulysses swath. So this indicates rotation with some of these storms. And you can see if the HRRR model is on to something, shows rotation with these storms in northern Illinois, eastern Iowa, and getting obviously over Lake Michigan into lower Michigan, especially southwestern sections of lower Michigan. So this is where the HRRR model is showing that higher tornado risk. And if you compare it with the Storm Prediction Center outlook, it actually makes sense. Now, I'm not going to show you the NAM version of this because it's always very aggressive. But I actually like the HRRR model depiction of this more than probably the NAM. But the predicted wind gusts, now all model guidance can be a little bit too aggressive with this. But if something like the HRRR model does get going, then you got to watch out for these storms that develop in areas of kind of like northeastern Iowa, moves through southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, over the southern sections of Lake Michigan, into lower Michigan, northern Indiana, all the way into the Detroit area, and then eventually into northwestern sections of Iowa tomorrow morning. It really likes this corridor, and this is why I think we could get it upgraded to a slight risk potentially in this area. But, you know, this does have embedded 50, 60 mile per hour wind gusts in this line of storms. Is these clusters of storms, or does this develop into a line of storms? It's a tricky forecast today across this area. It really is. So just know that if you're in the risk of severe weather today, just take it serious. So not a super high-end threat by any means, but it's a tough one to forecast. Now up here, it's also a tough one to forecast. Now the HRRR model is only buying in to the energy that really comes out of Canada late tonight. For example, I just ran through the entire evening all the way to about midnight, 1 a.m. in the morning tonight. And there's nothing going on in South Dakota, really nothing going on in Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa. The only area of concern is up here, based off this run of the HRRR model, is northern sections of North Dakota. But these storms can pack a significant punch. They could develop earlier than this, a little later than this, or they can be right on what this is showing. But you know, if you live in, really, I would say anywhere in the Dakotas, be aware of some strong storms. The HRRR model is only like any idea of these. And it really doesn't get these going until like after midnight tonight. And by the time I'm waking up tomorrow morning, it's saying, hey, we're going to have a significant line of storms surging through areas of eastern North Dakota, especially northeastern North Dakota, getting into northern Minnesota. Okay, now we compare this with the NAM model. And I'll be honest, I hadn't even looked at it yet. So this is going to be new to me, but we can kind of break it down as we go. Same thing as the HRRR model. It comes in a lot faster, though. For example, this is around 7 to 8 p.m. It already has storms moving across a good chunk of North Dakota. What happens as we get later? There's some storms kind of straddling the South Dakota-Nebraska line. Has these storms surging a little bit further south into North Dakota. But it does get these storms into eastern South Dakota, where there is a risk of significant severe weather per the Storm Prediction Center. So it has this area kind of well north of the Sioux Falls area, but this is starting to surge into southern Minnesota as we're getting in around 5 to 6 a.m. And these storms could be packing a punch. So this is a tough forecast for anybody trying to forecast this, guys. It really is. And you know, I would just, hey, look at the Storm Prediction Center outlook and say, hey, okay, I live in a threat area. There's a risk of strong to severe storms today. That's the way I would take it. And, you know, this is the NAM's version of the predicted wind gust swath here. And it does show, hey, where it shows storms, there's a pretty high-end risk of damaging winds that kind of come with it. The HRRR model, here's the updraft Ulysses swath. Really doesn't show anything until we get into the overnight hours, and then we're waking up to some rotating thunderstorms along this line, and that develops up in Canada, sweeps down the North Dakota, and then eventually gets into Minnesota tomorrow morning. some rotating updrafts, some rotation with this storm, a tornado risk for sure. That's why they have the 2% risk up here. But you look at the wind gust swath, it is overdoing this by a mile down here in South Dakota, showing in a very aggressive complex of storms right now in South Dakota, but this line of storms is not that aggressive at all. So it's just tough to look at guidance here because it's hard to tell where these storms are going to form today. This is a tough one for me to even talk about. Thankfully, it's not like a moderate risk or a high risk that we're dealing with, and it's this hard to figure out. This is just kind of an everywhere kind of thing. But it does pick up on that line of storms coming out of Canada, even areas of Montana, and does show 30, 40, 50 mile per hour wind gusts with this line of storms into North Dakota late tonight. So it's kind of just, this is one of those days where, I preach about this, guys. It's important to have a reliable radar on your phone. Now, some people are going to counter this, but I don't believe much into the Futurecast models on like the Weather Channel. But sometimes they're good. I don't look at them. I do look at model guidance, which is basically a kind of a form of a Futurecast, right? So it's kind of like contradicting myself, but I'm not about to get on the Weather Channel and look at a Futurecast there. But I hop on the Weather Channel app sometimes, so don't let me fool you. I'll hop on it sometimes in the winter a lot, I would say, when I'm kind of comparing what the models are showing and what the real what the forecast is compared to the Weather Channel app, which likes to. Man, one of the biggest things here in like the Carolinas is the Weather Channel app will throw a snowflake icon on like your default iPhone app or the Weather Channel app, and will throw everybody in a loop. Everybody and their brothers, uncles, cousins, grandma will tell the other person that it's going to snow like next Tuesday, like 8 days from now, and it spreads like a wildfire. And then people like me has to like combat that and say, no, there's more to it than a snowflake icon on your weather app. But anyways, I got to get off on one side story at least once a video. But here in the western U.S., kind of like yesterday, just rotating downpours around high pressure. So this is around, for example, around 2 to 3 o'clock this afternoon. We got storms that are possible, downpours possible anywhere from California, Nevada, southern Idaho, all throughout Utah, areas of Arizona, Colorado, areas of Wyoming, northern New Mexico. But not everybody will get this. Some people might get a big old downpour. Some people might not get anything. But there is a risk of severe weather down here in Arizona mainly today. This does include Flagstaff down to Tucson. Level 1 out of 5 risk. So you certainly don't want to ignore that. Could have some more robust thunderstorms down here. And Arizona could pop off a haboob or something like that. So be aware of that. Then, of course, we get into tomorrow morning. Things are a lot quieter. The blend of all models not showing much with this, not much love at all. Just very small amounts, a few 1/100ths of an inch, 1/10 of an inch here, 2/10 of an inch there. But does show kind of the spin in nature with this moisture. So temperatures. 90s, low 100s across the southeast, very hot. A little bit of a boundary in place separating pretty hot summer temperatures with just decent temperatures. Only the 80s up here in the upper Midwest. Some 70s, mainly widespread 80s. Once you get down to like the mid-Atlantic, it gets well into the 90s. Very hot day along the big cities of the southern sections like the I-95 corridor, up in the mid-Atlantic, like the D.C. area, Baltimore, well into the 90s. And a hot day across the deep south, the middle of the country, another hot day, temperatures well into the 90s, 100s. And, it's starting to cool back down, in the western U.S. Still very hot, but, not as brutally hot in the Valley of California, for example. So there is more severe weather days to come. Tomorrow, there's a severe weather event we're expecting, and it does mention at the very end of the discussion per the Storm Prediction Center, they don't have the confidence to bump it up to another category, to an enhanced risk, but it does mention it. So I wouldn't be surprised if we end up getting an enhanced risk for tomorrow. We'll kind of discuss more on this in the next video. Thinking about doing a video this evening. Not quite sure if I will. But a slight risk for just the immediate Midwest area, higher populated regions. Huge marginal risk also. Tornado threat, 2% risk. If you live in that green area, wind threat, 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. And the hail threat, not as big, but that could increase. Then we go into our Tuesday. Very long, scrawny, strung out marginal risk at the base of this upper trough, digging down into the upper Midwest. So there is a risk of severe weather for Tuesday, just probably not as significant. I want to talk about this pattern change. I haven't mentioned it much, but I know it's been very hot. It's been brutally hot summer. But the good news is the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, this was issued yesterday, is calling for below average temperatures. A good percent chance of it too across a lot of these areas that have dealt with really nasty heat. I mean, the chances of below average temperatures are the highest in Missouri, Arkansas, surrounding states. But I mean, we got a cooler pattern coming in. If you live in the blue area, even the near normal area, this doesn't include my neck of the woods here in the Carolinas, which is awesome. But unfortunately, the heat's going to continue to kind of rebound and flex again across the western U.S. But this area right here, due to a trough digging in, is going to bring cooler than average temperatures. Now, let me reiterate this. I don't want anybody to think that this is some fall cold front that's going to bring a crisp 50-degree morning. It's going to make you want to bring your pumpkin spice latte out, go outside and read a book. It is still going to be hot. This is going to be driven off an unsettled pattern, rainier conditions, and yes, this could bring a cooler morning, especially the further north you live. But for my friends down here deeper, the further south you get, the cooler average temperatures are probably going to be replaced for higher humidity. And higher humidity typically comes with those higher rain chances. So higher rain chances typically means lower temperatures because of cloud cover. Obviously, when it's raining, it's not going to be 105 degrees outside. So this is really driven off more of an unsettled pattern. And it makes sense, and it correlates well with this. Same time frame, 19th through the 23rd of this month of July, the chances of above average, there is a chance of above average precipitation. It's not super high, the highest in Texas, but I mean, you do got, a 40 to 50% chance, about a 50-50 shot of precipitation being above normal. Of course, this isn't in the form of rain. In the form of snow. It's in the form of rain. I wish it was in the form of snow, but we're in the middle of July, for crying out loud. So there is a chance we could have a bit more of a rainier pattern in these areas. And I think that this will actually unfold also. And we kind of look at what's driving this pattern. The orange color, that's high pressure. Blue color, lower pressure. So this is an upper trough and an associated cold front with unsettled weather being brought with it diving down. So remember, lower pressure typically means unsettled weather. Higher pressure, there's more that goes to it, but in general, more of a stagnant air mass. Rising air with high pressure typically means calmer conditions, but could get very hot. Now, watch as this blue area kind of oozes south. We get into Wednesday afternoon. This blue area is probably bringing unsettled weather. I know this probably doesn't mean a whole lot to you, but this is bringing a flow around this, probably going like this. Okay, this is bringing up kind of a southwesterly flow, and this is probably enhancing, and this is bringing a lift in the atmosphere and increasing probably the moisture in this area, getting pulled up from the south. We won't talk too much on that, but in general, just know that this area in blue is going to bring cooler than average temperatures, but also an unsettled rainier pattern. And this eventually kind of weakens and gets into the eastern U.S., but there's still troughing in place. It's just not strong. You can see it by these lines right in here. There's still a trough in place. Still there. It's just not a very strongly influencing trough. It's still bringing unsettled weather, though. You kind of have like a neutral look here with no orange in place, no blue in place, kind of a middle ground. But typically we've talked about this. Remember that middle ground normally means unsettled weather. We talk about that a lot during a severe weather season when you're looking at this map here, indicating ridging and troughing. So this entire area is right in the middle ground, right? So you're probably going to get unsettled weather. But you keep on going, it looks like we sort of start to get some blue back in here. This tells us that maybe there's some sort of kind of cut off upper low in place developing kind of embedded into this ridge, and I think this is probably a better probably a better way to look at this, a little bit more of a broad look here. You know, there looks like there's an embedded developing upper low kind of stuck in this ridge. It's built all the way up in Canada. And this will continue to bring unsettled weather, especially for the middle of the country. And this is getting all the way about a week from now. So don't want to go too much further than this because some of this information could change. But right at the tail end of this week period, we have another trough digging down. So if you were to keep this going about 240 hours out, 10 days out, it looks like this unsettled weather pattern kind of continues through about at least mid to late month. And if you compare that with the precipitation map from the Euro, not anything too crazy through about midweek. But you know, you start to get into about Wednesday afternoon, all you're going to see is just splotches of green, some yellows and reds on here. But just look at that and say, hey, that's daily afternoon shower and storm chances. And then it increases a little bit further to the south. You notice not as much up here to the north now. That's because that upper trough, the cold front boundary, sagging south. Everybody's south of some sort of boundary in place in this area, getting a lot of shower and storm activity. So it makes sense based off the precipitation map. You keep this going, unsettled weather getting into Thursday into Friday. Look at Friday. It looks like a lot. It looks like a pretty high-end storm potential for Friday. We're getting into Saturday. It looks very stormy across the southeast. Getting into Sunday, same thing. I mean, we're taking this all the way into like early next week. It looks like we are entering a very stormy pattern. I'm not talking about severe weather. I'm just talking about a higher chance of summer-type thunderstorms. And you take it between now and next Monday at morning, and this pattern is still raging on, I think, after that. And this is the blend of all models. The chances of rain across the Carolinas looks the highest. I mean, and I think this is being a little conservative, but several inches of rain is possible. Same thing with the deep south. But if you do kind of look at the European ensemble here, and I think it shows a better look of it. Same kind of thing with the Carolinas, 2, 3, 4 inches of rain. But you look at the south central U.S. too. It doesn't show as much, but I think that this could increase for this area. But really, like I said, for the southeast, it looks like we have a solid pattern that's moving in. That's going to start, steadily take dents into this drought that we've, pretty much have developed over the last several weeks. So that's good news. And I do want to mention here, this is going to bring those below average temperatures too. So I kind of bring it back here. We're going to deal with the above average temperatures the early portion of this week. And then eventually some below average temperatures do come in. Now this is measured in Celsius, but just taking the blue, this is a few degrees below average in Fahrenheit. So a cooler than average pattern is going to settle in for an extended period, guys. So it's good news. And like I said, I'm not talking about low temperatures in the 50s and 40s. I mean, we could get that a little bit further north in this period, but in general, I'm just talking about it's mainly driven off cooler high temperatures, not cooler low temperatures, but we could get some cooler low temperatures too. The National Hurricane Center, there's nothing to really talk about. Tropical cyclone activity is not expected during the next 7 days, so it continues to be quiet. And watching this little wave out here in the main development region, a little bit more robust than all the other activity. But there's a lot of dry air, Saharan dust on the northern portion of this wave. Nothing really showing model guidance-wise that this is going to survive, especially with a tut diving in. So I do want to show you this little wave out here. It won't stay quiet out here for long, guys. So let's just enjoy this quiet period as we have it. But that's all I got, guys. Thank y'all for tuning in. God bless all y'all, and y'all have a wonderful day.